Approaching a year now since my guest today finally left the presidential palace in Georgia after months of political crisis. She is the fifth president of Georgia, who many in and outside Georgia say is still the rightful president of the country after highly disputed elections then. Now, she became president at the end of 2018. Her candidacy initially as an independent, then supported by the ruling Georgian Dream Party. But during her time, she became increasingly isolated again from the party, notably due to it becoming closer and closer with Russia and pulling away from the European Union. You'll remember, of course, thousands and thousands of people then taking to the streets in support of her and, of course, the country's wish to join Europe. Well, Salome Zurabishvili joins me now here in the studio. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. If you're still the rightful president of Georgia, why did you make that decision to leave the palace?
Because you cannot hold to a building. It has no meaning. What has the meaning is the support of the population, and it's the fact that you are still recognized and also supported by your major partners. The rest is just transforming that into a battle that very soon would have become something that would be a joke. It's much more important than to be standing on the streets. When I'm standing on the streets with my people, it's much more important to be here testifying for Georgia's future, or in the Congress, US Congress or elsewhere, where I can bring the voice, which has been my duty even when I was a president, because as you might know, I didn't have executive powers, unfortunately, unlike Maya Sandu, which allowed her to keep the country on the right track. But I always had a voice, which became more and more forceful as the authorities of the country departed from the European way.
So you don't think it just means you've been sidelined now and the other president is taking...
I don't think that he's very present.
No.
No, very president.
In those weeks, I mean, there were thousands of people out on the streets. There still are supporting Europe, supporting your position. I mean, how did it feel watching that support, if you like?
Well, it's what keeps me going. It's this support, but again, it's not a support for me personally. It has some parts of this personal support, but it's mostly because they see me as the symbol of the European way of Georgia, because of my European past also, but of our common European future, because they know that that has been the belief that has really brought me to Georgia, to the presidency, and that I will be until the end, as they are on the streets, until the end, defending this path of Georgia, because it's the only alternative possible for Georgia. Otherwise, it's again falling into Russia's hands, and that is not a future that Georgians want.
What do you feel about the response to what happened from the international community? I mean, of course, there were words of support, but not much else?
Not much else. It's very difficult. We are not in Ukraine's situation. There is no material support that they could bring to this opposition and to the defense of the European past. So there have been statements, not enough maybe. But of course, our European as American partners have been distracted by the main priority, which is also, and that's something I want to underline, it's also our main priority is Ukraine, because partly the future of Georgia, as it is for European countries, is going to be played in Ukraine. The other part we are playing for you, for the security of Europe and of Ukraine maybe tomorrow, because we are being the test case for Russia of what a hybrid war can bring them through elections, through propaganda, through many different, using all the instruments that they master much better than they master the war. In fact, we have seen that the war in Ukraine has been lasting now for almost 4 years. For the same time, the hybrid war in Georgia has been ongoing, and the results are maybe more positive for Russia in Georgia than they are yet in Ukraine, and I hope they will never be. Because until now, Ukraine is winning the war by not deferring to Russia. And what I want also to underline that I saw that in the initial plan, there were suggestions that the elections in Ukraine should be held in 100 days, that is very dangerous. We've gone through that. And nobody has really yet studied the preventive measures that have to be taken.
You can't trust the system, in other words.
You can trust, and especially after a war of that kind, it will be very difficult for the current administration to take all the preventive measures that we have not been able to take in peaceful circumstances, that Maya Sandu has been better to take. So that is very dangerous. Another thing that is very dangerous in those peace plans, that what I've seen, I'm not aware of the last developments, you cannot say that Russia should never intervene again in Europe and in Ukraine. What about the other neighbors? What about Moldova? What about Georgia? Russia should not be able to keep territories that it occupied by force, whether it's in Georgia, whether it's in Moldova, because that's an incitation to continue in the future.
Was there a way, do you think, to stop Georgia drifting back towards Russia, to stop what was your party at one point, Georgian Dream, turning towards Russia?
Of course, because there is a massive support of the Georgian population, and it's still there. There is a support of our partners, and I think that we're going to have what we've been asking one day, tomorrow, maybe later, elections in which we're going to fight in a different manner, because we have taken the lesson of the first rigged election, not the first time that they were rigged, but massively rigged with the help of Russia. And there we will need, that's when we will need the massive support of our European partners.
That's crucial, isn't it? I mean, I was looking at the latest communique from the European Union, its latest enlargement report. This was published just on November the 4th. The European Commission accused Tbilisi of serious democratic backsliding, described it as an EU candidate in name only, with no viable prospect of joining the European Union. What do you think of that assessment?
Well, that's true. That's very true.
But
it's
how can you turn that
true.
around?
It's finally true that the statements of the European Union recognize what these authorities have been doing to the will of the people and to the path of Georgia towards Europe. But no measure has been taken over the past, what I mentioned, almost 4 years, that Georgia has been drifting through different legislations, through attacks on all the European and American ambassadors, very direct attacks, no reaction to this rhetoric. Very direct attack on the European Union itself, on the fact that the European Union wanted to wage a new front of war in Georgia, as together with the Americans. All of that has not brought the immediate reactions. Why? Because I think the Europeans were wary of losing Georgia. And in fact, by doing that, they have lost it faster or are losing it faster than by reacting and making strong statements to show the population, because after all, it's all that we need, that they are understood, that they are supported, and that they are carrying in very difficult conditions. Today it's terror in Georgia, but they are carrying the European flag, and they will carry it up to the end. And I'm an optimist, so I think that we will see better days in Georgia and better European days.
I can see you're an optimist, but being realistic, obviously we've saw thousands of people out on the streets in support of the European Union. There are also thousands of people who wish to stay more with Russia. That's obviously the way that the country has been heading.
I would disagree with that. I think that there are people that cannot express for different reasons today, because we have a terror regime and not everybody is able to stand up. But the figures that we had up to the very last moment when we have had these opinion polls still show a very massive support to the European path, because any Georgian that sees that 20% of the country is occupied, that in 2008 Russia aggressed Georgia, no Georgian in his right mind wishes to go back to Russia, might be afraid of the propaganda about war, might be afraid of losing certain privileges, might be afraid of going to jail without reason, which is the case for so many young people today in Georgia that are taken out of the streets for no reason at all. So all of these reasons to stay silent are understandable, but that doesn't mean that there is a pro-Russian mass in Georgia. It has never
So
been.
if that's the case, how do you turn it around?
We turn it around, I think, through the peaceful ways, which is through elections. Again, the next elections, we're not going to be naive. We're not going to fight it in the same ways as we did in the past. And we certainly will demand more support of the partners outside in terms of fighting back the propaganda, fighting back the different instruments used for rigging elections.
I'd like to ask you one last question from a personal point of view. Forget the fact that you're the president of Georgia or not. Was there a point where you feared for your life amid all of this? And how are you able to talk about and continue that optimism that you've spoken about this morning?
The optimism comes from the fact that I look at these people that take much more risks than I do, because I still have these contacts outside, which are protection clearly, and popularity inside, which is another protection. So I'm more protected than many people that are today standing on the streets. So I have no right to be more fearful than they are.
Good to have you with us on the programme today. Thanks for coming in and talking to us. Salome Zurabishvili, the fifth president, many would say, of, as we said, of course, still the president of Georgia, joining us here on set. Thanks very much once again.
Thank you very much.